Hello and welcome to another LinkedIn Live event brought to you by Ambition Group. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kyle Winterbottom. I'm the CEO and founder of Ambition Group, and I also host our Driven by Data community, which consists of our podcast, our event series, our mentorship program, our magazine, and a raft of other things. We do these LinkedIn Live events fairly frequently on usually very specific topics. And I'm delighted that you are able to join us today. So today's event is a panel discussion. We've got 4 fantastic guests, and we're all going to be talking about creating and transforming data culture. The guests are from some very recognizable brands that I'm sure you will know, and their day job is basically helping their respective organizations to build and create data culture within that business. So we want to make today as interactive and engaging as possible. So I want to make it very conversational. So please do get all of your questions in, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can as the session unfolds. We've only got 45 minutes or so, so we're going to have to make it punchy, but we want to make sure that we get into the detail and get your questions answered. So let's jump into it. We'll welcome today's guests to the stage. And I guess before we kick off, we will ask everyone to give themselves a brief introduction, because I will not be able to do that justice. So, Hannah, do you want to go first? Kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Davis, and I work for Admiral's UK Insurance Branch. And my role is Head of Data Culture and Excellence. And so within there, I also look after our well-established Data and AI Academy and helping transform our business and how we think about data and AI here. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Sandra, do you want to go next, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Sandra Outshoff. I work at Heineken for the past 6 years, focusing on data culture there. And I've worked in data and analytics for over 30 years. I've been with my feet deep in the mud. And now I'm trying to bring all of my 90,000 colleagues along on the exciting data journey.
Nice. Yeah, that'll be a job. And I want to make sure your background there, where that's not real, right?
No, it's unfortunately it's not real, but it's a favorite place of mine.
Yeah, perfect. Kelly, do you as the honours?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Callie Wood. I head up our data strategy and culture in AXA Retail. So a big part of my role is embedding our data strategy. So that's working with the business to really understand where our strategic opportunities are and translating those into data use cases. But then there's the other side of my role that's focused on data culture, which is obviously what we're here to talk a bit more about today.
Yep, absolutely. Perfect. And last but not least, Josh.
Hello. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Josh Cunningham, Group Head of Data Culture within Lloyds Banking Group. I've been at Lloyds for around about 18 months. And when I joined, I think it was probably a little bit more rare to have roles that are squarely focused on driving data culture across the group. So really pleased to see the times are kind of changing now with that, and I'm really excited about this panel where we've got lots of colleagues and peers who are driving this across their organizations as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. All obviously, we'll jump straight into it, and as I said to the viewers earlier on, we'll try to get through the questions as they arrive, and if not, we'll try to get them done at the end. So we'd hope to think that everyone that's signed up to kind of be here and watch this today, over 300 people, are probably done so for a very specific reason, and therefore know the bulk of the topic. But I guess what I found from my research, and obviously speaking with people like yourselves and people with similar roles in other organizations, is that the topic itself of data culture in quotation marks can mean different things to different organizations. So I thought it might be a good starting point just to make sure that we are all on the same page, or not, as the case may be, right, in kind of defining what we think that might need to be. So Hannah, I'll come to you first again, please.
Okay, so I'm assuming we're all going to have quite different views of this, but I think to me and to Admiral, I guess, our difficulty is how we collectively view it, manage and utilize data within the business. And really, for me, if I think about what a great data culture is, it's where everyone in our organization can understand the value of it, is able to use it comfortably and confidently within their role to improve the outcomes to us as a business. And so I think it has almost that kind of buy-in from our execs, that it's talked about in the right forums, that it's respected, valued, appreciated, and that we have a training element. And I think quite often, and I have quite strong views on this, which will probably come out as we chat today, but quite often I see people starting to move the needle on training, but they don't think about the wider piece. And I think training as a tick box is just not the way forward. It's a good thing to do, but I don't know that it would move the needle in that great data culture piece.
Interesting. Okay, lots to unpack all that. This is the problem with these conversations. Straight away, my mind's like a million questions, and I'm like, okay, what should I ask next? Has anybody got anything to add to that? Sandra, I'll come to you. I guess what does data culture mean for you, and I guess maybe Heineken more specifically?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Hannah just said, and what we've formulated as our goal in Heineken is that in the end we want every decision to be data driven. Because it's very easy to say that you want to be data driven, but you have to not just talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And it also means that in an ideal data driven Heineken, all our executives are also doing this. So whenever a proposition is made, a proposal is introduced, an executive should ask, what is the data and the analysis behind this proposal? And another question they should ask is, can we run a quick test? Because for me, being data-driven is also about experimenting and not being afraid to fail. And executives supporting that.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Calla, I'll come to you. Anything specific that comes to mind?
I think Hannah and Sandra have covered it quite nicely, but I think it's really bringing in the kind of the people side of data. So it's around, and as Hannah said, it's touching not just our data producers, so those are our data professionals, but it's our data consumers as well. And how do we uplift that sort of base level of data literacy across the business to really empower the full organization to use data to drive those decisions. It's also about sort of improving the trust in data as well, because I think that's a bit of a barrier that we've often had. So I think it's kind of an all-encompassing term around the sort of attitude towards and kind of confidence and capabilities with data.
Yeah, nice synopsis there. Josh, anything that you want to add? Sorry, I'll give you the graveyard shift there of after three other people have already had a stab.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I definitely agree with, I guess, the key themes called out already. I think, Carl, you alluded at the very start to this around data culture. Even the basic question is, what is it? It can mean so many different things to so many different people, right? So I think it's really important in any organization to, first of all, actually boil it down and write down a clear articulation of what it means to you and your organization. Absolutely agree that, for us in Lloyd, it is all about the key things that have been called up already, right? Around driving behavioral change, the attitude shift towards being data driven. I guess my only goal then would be, I would encourage people to hold it in their heads in terms of maybe break it down by target audience. So, break the question down. What does data culture mean to, say, business colleagues? I think that is going to be driving high literacy, not being afraid of data, being data-led, being able to self-serve and really understand that. And then I guess breaking it down into that second target audience then of what does data culture mean to data colleagues? And I think that'll be something a little bit different. So that's probably going to be things like being part of an organization where they're excited about that culture in general and being a data practitioner there. So thinking about communities, culture of innovation, collaboration, really having that environment for learning and self-progression and feeling that belonging as part of a broader organization. I think thinking about data culture in terms of those two target audiences, I think really, really important.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. There's loads of stuff to pick out of that, which we'll definitely get to as we go through today then. So I think one of the things that I find fascinating when I have these conversations with certain organizations is they are people and organizations like yours that have appointed people like you to, I guess, lead the charge in your respective businesses on tackling these very, very broad, very wide, very complex questions and activities. And then there are other organizations that, for whatever reason, they don't have people sat in a specific role. They don't have a specific culture or comms team or whatever the case may be. I guess what's the benefits, in your opinion, of having your team, your roles, whatever the case may be, and having people dedicated towards changing that culture? And I guess it'd be good to understand why in your organizations and your environments that was the decision that was taken and those roles exist, if that makes sense. Anyone want to go first?
Yeah, happy to kick off.
Go on, Jeff.
So I think the first thing I would say is data culture is everyone's job. It's the responsibility of everyone across the organization, especially data practitioners, to really drive things forward. I think, having said that, though, how do you get started? And I think the way you do is by creating those dedicated roles you've talked about, Kyle, almost having them as catalysts to spark that change and to start that shift in terms of dedicated roles that are driving key initiatives. And the way we think about that in Lloyd's is we've got dedicated central teams. We've also set up spoke teams out in each business unit as well. So all of these people coming together to act as a bit of an interconnected community to drive some of these key initiatives. And I think, like I said, I've been at Lloyd's 18 months, and rolling the clock forward to where we are now, I think, it's been those roles in particular that have really helped to spark that change, but then drive that snowball effect almost, where lots of the other colleagues across all the different data teams and into business teams as well, they really become part of that journey.
Yeah, interesting. Sandra, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I think when I started in Heineken, I joined as an analytics translator to help smooth the path for the analytics products that we were building. And over time, that role grew into the role that I have now. And I think it's a recognition of the fact that, if you want to be a really data-driven company and take advantage of those faster and better decisions that bring a lot of business value, you need to bring everyone along. So my job is also to make people in Heineken realize that we're not just a brewing company anymore or a marketing company, but we're growing into being a technology company. And basically every company is doing that right now. And we need people to be on board and not to be afraid of this, because, if you have failed your statistics class in school, you might be forever afraid of data and numbers and working with them. But nowadays, you can't really do your job without knowing something about data and analytics. So my job is to make that less scary for people and to make people, as I think Hannah also said, feel comfortable working with data. And I think it really helps to have people dedicated to that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Callie, anything to add there from an AXA perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I think Josh hit the nail on the head that the data culture, it touches everyone. And I think within our data teams, we are leading by example. So obviously, we've set out our data culture, our vision and values. So we have quite defined values that we want everyone to live by. But in the data team, it's us who set the example of that, and we live and breathe that in the way that we operate with the business. I'd also like to say it's no small feat to actually get these initiatives off the ground. And it really enables our technical teams to continue delivering, to the highest performance that they can. But it enables us to really work on helping them develop, but also helping to bring the rest of the business up with us. And I think it's a kind of unique skill set for data culture roles. So you have to really understand the data, but you also have to be that people person as well.
Yeah, 100%. So we've got some questions coming in now, which I guess, as I anticipated would happen, we're already on my list anyway, so we'll just start knocking them out of the park as they come in. So Hannah, I'll come to you first. Faye has asked, could you give some examples of data culture initiatives? And I think that'll be a good one to pop around the group after you finish speaking, just to see if there's different flavors, within different environments maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started trying to transform our data culture by setting up a data academy And it started very much as an offering to our data community, of which there's about 900 people that work across some sort of data role within Admiral. And then obviously looked to expand that across the rest of the business. Much like Callie said, it's no small feat. You kind of can't underestimate how important people are and how, you know, I think Sandra, you mentioned something which I like to refer to as that taught fear. It's a hard thing to change, and people are almost against using data or think they can't do it in a work setting. So we set out to incorporate how we could give people the confidence to use data and the skills. And so I guess most people would call it data literacy. I prefer data fluency, but we set out to create a data skills for all pathway, which is very much for everyone. We want it to be something that's very transformative. That's a real great education piece. We also looked at how people think about the value of data. So if you go back to my version of data culture and the definition I use, we want people to understand its importance, how interconnected it is, how you can't even get into our buildings or authenticate on our systems without using some sort of data. And so we've built a data awareness pathway. So it almost bridges the gap between those people who are our data practitioners, and we have a full academy in data and AI offering to those. We look after their progression, their career development. We then have our data skills for all, for those people that need to build skills in data. And then there's a pot in the middle that people need to understand and be aware of data, but maybe don't need to use it to the same degree as our kind of data professionals or our data consumers. So we've kind of bridged the gap in there and focused lots on that transformation piece. And then really, I think for me, it's about accessibility. So we offer out, you know, versions of resources, lunch and learns, seminars, events, community sessions, so that we can give people a space to come and support and be, you know, brought into the world. And a new version of what we've been doing lately is recruiting ambassadors who give us training and awareness and real that kind of into the business coaching that will help people come through and understand how we build that confidence, because you can't just give them the skill. It can't be a training piece that you say, well done, you passed the course, thank you so much, I will see you never, or I'll do a refresher in a year. You have to give them a way of being able to make those mistakes, as Sandra said, and fail fast and be able to learn how those skills are relatable to their role and how they then build the confidence to do this as a behavior, because ultimately their behaviors are our data culture. And that's hopefully a flavor of what we're doing here at Admiral.
Yeah, nice. Josh, are you doing things differently in terms of the types of initiatives, or is it largely similar?
Yeah, so I think lots of similarities in terms of what Hannah was describing. So we've also within Lloyds, we've got a data and tech academy, and similar to Hannah, that kind of focuses on those two audiences, right? You've got the data practitioners and diving deep into the different data specialisms, but then you've also got kind of data for all, right? Targeting business colleagues. I guess if I was to maybe thinking about the question, give a different example of a data culture initiative, then complementary though. So we run lots of initiatives around data talent growth and the different talent channels. So really leaning into T-levels, into apprenticeship schemes, into graduate schemes. And maybe if I just give a little bit of information on our graduate schemes then. So we've massively scaled data graduate schemes in Lloyds over the last couple of years. It's a centralized scheme now where we bring in data talent across the bank. We've broadened that. So historically it focused on data science and analytics, but now we've got an adjacent scheme that focuses on data management and strategy as well, and really scaling the numbers. So stepping back 2 or 3 years, we were at kind of the 10s and the 20s. Last September we took on 63, and this September's intake is 100 data graduates. So massively scaling up in a centralized way. We bring graduates in, we run them through quite an intensive boot camp for 8 or 9 weeks, and then we rotate them around the different business areas, but keep them interlocked into central data teams as well. So I think a good example of how to, you know, bolster those kind of initiatives for existing colleagues by also developing the pipeline as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, both of you there, what you've described is there's some kind of, I guess, internal from a data analytics community perspective, and then some for the business, again, in quotation marks, and there's varying levels, I guess, of maturity around that. Sandra, does that look any different in a non-financial services firm, out of interest?
Yeah, I think a lot of similarities to what we've just heard. One thing we also did starting a few years ago is take Heineken management teams through an upskilling that focuses on sort of on the basics of data and analytics, but especially on culture and mindset and what is expected from them as executives. So that helps them to feel comfortable to discuss that topic and also to ask the right questions and steer their teams in the right direction. So that I think was an initiative that really helped the data journey in Heineken. Another thing that we've done quite consistently since we started with building advanced analytics solutions in Heineken is to communicate very broadly to a very broad audience. So we have Workplace, which is our internal Facebook. And from the start, we've described our own initiatives there and what kind of business value they are bringing to Heineken. But we've also looked outside and brought the outside world into Heineken. So the last year, of course, we've talked a lot about generative AI and how people can use it in a safe way to make their lives at home and at work easier. So those are all things that we did to help the data journey along, in addition to all the things that were already said.
Yeah, nice. Callie, anything different or much of the same, I guess?
I mean, we've got a really well-established data academy set up as well that focuses on that sort of upskilling and development of our data professionals, but also kind of building that data literacy that we've already talked about across the business. So it's kind of a mixture of, we've set out quite clear learning pathways so people can see how they can sort of progress and develop. And it's a mixture of in-house training that we've created, but also sort of leveraging external resource training as well. We've built out a really good, strong data community, which is that sort of predominantly our non-data professionals as well. So the engagement that we've got is sort of 700 plus of that. So that's really great that we've got so many people putting themselves forward for that. But aside from those, I mean, we've got some quite regular touch points that we kind of keep up that engagement with the sort of wider community and our data professionals. So we started 2 years ago, we launched our first data discovery week. So that was a week worth of, where we really focused on data. We had different workshops, success stories, external speakers, kind of drop-in sessions to learn more about coding, things like that. So we launched that in the first year and we grew the audience tenfold in its second year. So that's just showing how, our sort of culture journey, we're getting more and more traction and people joining us on that each year. And on the leadership side, I mean, that's quite a tricky audience, to how we actually keep them engaged. Obviously, they've got a lot of demands on their time, but we've done a few things with them. So we have a data download series. So that's a series of events that we run sort of roughly on a monthly cadence. And we did an Ask the XCOM panel. So I guess a slightly similar setup to this, but we had questions that could be submitted beforehand to really grill our XCOM members on how data touches their worlds, and we also put them in the firing line sort of with on-the-spot questions as well. So that was a really great way to sort of break down that barrier between our XCOM and all members of the business. We've also run a really successful reverse mentoring scheme. So we have one of our data scientists reverse mentoring our CEO, sort of bringing her up to speed on AI, and got great feedback for that. So
nice. Yeah, the questions are coming in thick and fast now, so I'm doing a lot of scrolling to try and maybe capture a few of these together. So there's been quite a few questions around measurements, right? So I'll try to group some of these together just so we can kind of get them answered. So Tanya has asked, I guess, how do you measure, one, how good the data culture is, and then two, the success of the initiatives themselves? And then if I can clump a third one together for you, just to be really awkward and make the question even more difficult to answer for you. There was someone who asked, let me see if I can find it, if there's ways that you've figured to measure the value of having a data-driven culture in terms of the business itself, right? So we've got, how do you know how good your data culture is? How do you measure that? How do you measure the initiatives themselves? And how do you measure the impact that has on the business, I guess, are the group of questions there. Hannah, I'll come back to you on that.
I'm not sure I can keep up with these questions. So I think how good your data culture is, I think the best way really is that we found is by putting your ear to the ground, speaking to people, understanding what they're doing. We see, lots of success in going to those executive groups and business leaders who've gone through our data skills for all pathway and almost talking to them about that changed behavior. And we do lots of that kind of assessments through the training pieces. We build all our training in-house currently, so it's a really fresh way to understand what's happening. And we go back and we revisit those people that are saying, I didn't use data to do this before, and we check and we assess how they do in the world of having gone through that training. For me, I think we also put a lot of emphasis on how engaged the business is with us. So we have lots of engagement methods. We talk to the business in lots of ways. We talk to them through Viva Engage and through email and through drop-ins and through lunch and learns, and they're open to people to come along. And so we measure and track our engagement. In terms of success, I think there's lots of ways to measure this, and we've done it in lots of ways. And I think we continue to change how and when and at what point we measure it. But really, I think there's things through productivity and efficiency metrics. How quickly are we now able to do something? How streamlined is our process? How much self-serve is happening? What's our kind of reduced attrition if we're thinking about worlds of talent development and supporting people through in our data communities. And then we also look at kind of how our projects go. So we see some projects that don't have data representation at the point at which they need it, and so they tend to be delayed, they tend to extend, they tend to have other costings associated to needing to do repairs or needing to find some way of patching something through. And then reductions in wrong decisions, I guess, is another one. If I think about really how you measure it, I think there's lots of ways, and I don't think a one-size-fits-all approach really works, because I think it's more about what does data culture truly mean to you, and what measurement and what metric are you trying to change? Are you trying to build confidence? Because how you assess confidence is very different to how you assess the people's kind of approach to using it through projects. So hopefully there's a little bit of a flavor, but I think it's a hard one, and I'll be really honest and say it's probably a challenge all of us in this call have had at some point. In how do we get to a point where we understand the value and can portray it for our business cases and for understanding the benefits to the team? And I think it's very hard in such a people-focused area to really come into the same sort of value decisions that maybe you would get from a tech purchase. So I think it's a difficult one, and I think all of us will probably have different views on how we calculate and measure it, and probably some suggestions we'll take away as well to help us.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think if anybody out there who's watching this has come up with the magic formula of how you calculate and measure the ROI of any data initiative, then get in touch. I'd love to have you on our podcast, because I've yet to find anyone that's been able to kind of quantify it, and articulate it to the letter. So I think that's always going to be difficult. Josh, I'll come to you. I guess what are the indicators then in terms of how good the data culture is, if that's moving in the right direction, and then I guess the success of how you measure particular initiatives?
Yeah, so I think Hannah touched on some really important points, right, that I'd want to draw out, which would be, number one, just recognizing data culture is something it's really, really hard to measure. I think the second one I'd want to draw out is, Hannah mentioned the link between, what data culture means to you. And we talked earlier about data culture being really difficult to actually define, right? So I think in your definition for your organization, then anchor the way you're measuring it to that definition. And I guess an example of that, so we'd probably all agree that data literacy or data fluency is a topic that absolutely firmly believes under the banner of data culture. That's probably the area where we're doing most measurement within Lloyd's. And if I think about, how does that work? So we've fleshed out quite a detailed approach towards data literacy. We've mapped out pretty common stuff, right? You've probably all done it, but pretty common stuff in terms of having different personas. We've got 5 different personas. We've got a data literacy scale. And then we have a fairly detailed survey where we ask colleagues a number of questions around their levels of comfort around using Excel, using Power BI, general familiarity with data. That survey allows us to actually build up a data literacy score, and that can be done at an individual colleague level, or it can aggregate through to business unit, or even for the group in general. What that allows us to do with that measurement is that, first of all, it allows us to focus our time and attention for, quite, I guess, relatively small teams relative to the entire business. But it also allows us to track that progress over time, so progress made towards data literacy. So that's probably the area of data culture we measure most deeply. And then just taking that step back to think about measurement of data culture more broadly. So what we're doing within Lloyds now is we're introducing data culture scorecards. We're doing that per business unit, and we can aggregate to group level. And on those scorecards, again, anchored to our definition of data culture, we've got things like our scores around our stakeholder buy-in. We've got average practitioner skill levels for some of the key data skills linked to our skills capture that we've run. We've got things like numbers of colleagues within that business unit on apprenticeships, numbers of learning hours completed, numbers of initiatives that they're running that link to data, for example. And then even measuring behavioral change, so thinking about the number of colleagues who are starting to take up self-service tools like Power BI, Tableau, etc. I think that's how you can start to track that behavioral change over time.
Yeah. Sandra, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's very important to measure how you're doing, right? Because you cannot advocate being a data-driven company and not be prepared to measure yourself in terms of success. But I agree, it's quite hard. So one thing we do is we track the amount of value we have on the business side from analytics initiatives, which is again not easy, but it's easier than for upskilling initiatives. So we know we're having multi-million value from analytics in Heineken. So that helps to fund these initiatives. What we also do is indeed track the results of our training programs. So we ask people right after the training program if they learned anything new and ask them about their NPS. So we can keep improving our training programs over time. But we also ask them a little bit later if they changed anything in their way of working. So, for example, if they're using those Power BI tools more than before because they now feel confident using them. And I think that's really important. And the last thing I want to highlight is that what we did is develop a data literacy test. And it's 10 questions. And it measures for our colleagues how data literate they already are. So it's not a self-assessment that you see a lot going around, but it's really they get a question like they are shown a graph and they need to say which of the 3 conclusions you can actually draw from that graph. And we've just developed that and we're piloting it. But over time, that will give us a way to measure how we're doing and also how we're progressing over time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's probably a fair and valid point to argue that if you are measuring the impact of the data analytics led projects from a business perspective, right, and almost getting to that holy grail of identifying what the ROI is, and that metric is increasing, then I guess the buy-in and investment into the culture, the comms, the literacy, and everything that comes with supporting that probably makes it slightly easier to kind of keep pushing, I guess, which is interesting. Callie, I'll come to you. Anything to add that's different there around measurement?
I mean, it's mostly been covered, but I think what's really important is doing a data maturity assessment of where you are now and where you want to be, and looking at which of those kind of key success metrics that you want to really focus on to see how you kind of progress along your journey. We, as everyone said, it's not the easiest to measure. It's not necessarily the most tangible metrics, but we've done things. So we do, with our data professionals, a self-assessment skills matrix. So it means that it's positioned more as a personal development opportunity. So, where do our individuals want to progress their kind of capabilities? But we also look at metrics, sort of our engagement metrics, the reach metrics of our initiatives. We also run a series of surveys as well, because I think that's a really good way to get people to sort of feedback on what their confidence in our data is, how much they trust our data, how accessible do they think it is, for our non-data professionals. But the really key one to us in terms of the value of our data culture initiatives is that sort of one step further is what value are they actually driving to the business. So I think it was Hannah that mentioned looking at sort of how are we influencing speed to decision making? How many wrong answers or are we avoiding now with these data culture initiatives, with people having that capability and confidence?
Yeah, really interesting. Questions keep coming thick and fast, and I'm getting somewhat overwhelmed if I'm honest. But there's been several here about talking about buy-in, particularly executive buy-in, and kind of getting sponsorship from the business. So we'll try just to tackle those questions a little bit more holistically. But I guess, have there been any specific activities or initiatives to get buy-in and get sponsorship for, I guess, investment funding, so on and so forth into this type of stuff? Sandra, I'll come to you first on that.
Yeah, I think the what paved the way in Heineken for these kind of initiatives is that we very clearly showed over time how much value analytics is bringing to the Heineken business, and in what areas of the business we can do this. And that really helped to invest not only in data culture and data literacy, but also in the data initiatives themselves. Because of course you can't really do great analytics without great data. And that's the less sexy part of data and analytics, but you need to get it right?
Yeah.
So I think we started doing small experiments across all the business areas of Heineken. So I think in the first 2 years we worked with Advanced Analytics and Heineken, we did over 30 experiments in different business areas. And that quickly showed us where the big pockets of money were to be found. And then we worked very closely together with the global business functions like sales and marketing and supply chain to identify together with them where we would focus our efforts and really build out products that were scaled and deployed because we have 87 operating companies across the globe. So we have a huge potential for scaling up.
Yeah.
So we decided together with the business functions where to do that. And I think over time, money talks, right? So showing what amazing value over time we are already getting from analytics initiatives, that really helps to get the executives' attention. And I must be honest, what also really helped recently is the advancement of Gen AI. So with ChatGPT becoming available, everybody knows about AI, and AI has become a lot less scary than before. So because when I started in Heineken 6 years ago, we were not allowed to say we were doing AI. We should say we were doing data and analytics because AI was too scary. And now, even my mother knows what AI is and generative AI is, and everybody is using it for homework and for work. And so that really helped to move the needle and to get the interest and the sponsorship.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably been one of the common recurring themes. If I think about all of these types of activities that we do in the podcast and the events, I think, generative AI has become a great opportunity to get, data and analytics more broadly into conversations that maybe previously they may have struggled with, especially if you think about, data management type topics that have probably been less focused on, right?
Yep.
Callie, I'll come to you. Executive sponsorship and buy-in. I think Sandra's stance was fairly clear, like show them the money and the rest will follow.
Yeah, I mean, we have a similar sort of approach, and so we've got a really well-established data innovation lab, which does that sort of demonstration for us. But we're really fortunate that our CEO, she's been doing the reverse mentoring with in AI. She's really all for it. So in all of our leadership conferences, there's always a healthy section on data. So what we're doing is we're really changing that mindset. So ensuring that our leadership do really understand how it benefits their business, their sort of areas of the business. So it's really getting that buy-in for them to understand, that it does touch everyone, even the roles that they may think don't, data is not a part of their day-to-day business. Everyone's role touches data, whether it's data collection, whether it's data storage, data quality, data usage. So it's not something that I would say is a challenge within AXO. I think we've got that buy-in from the senior level.
Nice. Hannah, anything that you did that might have been slightly out of the ordinary to kind of, drive more interest and buy-in and sponsorship?
So I think much like Carly said, I think we're quite privileged and lucky that, in Admiral, data has always been a really key part of our business. If you think about how insurance works, like it's the bread and butter of how we operate. But that's not to say that there aren't people that still want to use, their gut feel and make decisions that way. I think for me, really identifying those opportunities to make a difference. So, your quick wins, your how do we show this business area or this particular exact something that can make them buy in. And I think it's about the language, the terminology, the relatability, the really solving a problem that they want to solve. And I think in data in general, the people that understand it, like all of us, we are privileged in our knowledge of data, right? And I think we should acknowledge that. But I also think that it's on us to make it, accessible to all. And I almost think that terminology, language becomes a really important part of the job that we do in helping the business come with us. You can't have a purely technical talk and expect that your contact center agents and your, back office payroll staff will come on board and will understand you. So finding the ability to make something relatable to someone and make a difference for them is really important. So one of the things that we've done very recently is introduce a sponsorship program. So it's a diversity program for us led by our Data and AI Academy. And what we aimed to do was to increase the amount of data storytelling that happens across the business, because A, it's a great skill to have, but B, from a literacy and fluency point of view, it brings down the boundary. It lets people access the meaning and the motivation and the story behind data and the impact and the what to do next really quickly and easily. So what we did was we set up a storytelling and sponsorship program where we went to our senior leadership and we said, we will give you somebody to work with who is from our data areas, who is trained and an expert in data storytelling, to support you in an initiative that you might have, or a board pack or a paper where data storytelling can make the difference, can help you get that funding, can help you tell that story, can help you get the change that you need. And I think for me, that's really helped us give more back in that kind of way of saying, well, we'll give you this person to help support you, but you'll also now sponsor them and you'll advocate for them and you'll think about them and their kind of backgrounds and their next career move. So we call it kind of like a win to the power of three, because we all win in the grand scheme of things, which I think has really helped, and it's allowed them to choose what's really important to them as well, which I think helps.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I'm super conscious of time because we're already nearly 45 minutes into this. I'm not too sure where the time's gone. There's a ton of questions. What I will say is we'll try to get the bulk of these questions pulled off here, and we'll put them to the panel here and see if we can, I don't know, put it up in an article format or something for anyone that is interested. I guess last few minutes then before we finish, I think there's a couple of questions that people had asked me to ask, which I think might just be, it could just be a quick yes and no. I guess in terms of the initiatives themselves, someone asked me to talk about are these culture initiatives mandatory? Do they have to do them? Is this being enforced, or is it an opt-in, opt-out? I don't know if we have a quick whiz round and say yes or no. Hannah, yes or no?
From a data point of view, it's been come join us. From an AI point of view, we have gone mandatory.
Interesting. Sandra?
So far in Heineken, it's all join us if you're interested.
Interesting. Josh?
I think for us, we have a small amount of data modules that are mandatory, but then for the most part, they are heavily encouraged. And we think about methods of engagement to get people involved and excited, things like hackathons, community initiatives to try and drive that drumbeat.
Yeah, makes sense. Callie?
It's actually a really interesting point that we've been discussing a lot recently, but we are definitely along the lines of we want people to see it as part of their personal development, but it's up to us, it's our responsibility to really encourage them to understand why it's so important in their personal development. That being said, we are looking to introduce some mandatory training for all new starters, which basically just introduce what data is at AXA, how to sort of engage with the data teams as well.
Cool. All right. very conscious of time, but I want to finish on, I guess, if there's a key bit of advice, things to watch out for, any, challenges that you might have faced that you think, people need to think about that, or whatever the case may be. I guess lessons learned from your roles. I'm going to just pop around you again very, very quickly. What advice would you give to people in your shoes who are starting out tackling this type of work? Josh, I'll come to you.
I think probably 3 pieces of advice from me. The first one would be give it dedicated focus, so have dedicated individuals in the teams, as we talked about earlier. I think be really, really clear in terms of what your goals are, how you define data culture, as we've talked about. And then the final one would be do your best to take everyone on the journey, have a big focus on communication, engagement, and get everyone part of that.
Nice. Calla?
I think, definitely having a look at that, as I mentioned before, that maturity assessment. So where are you now and where is it that you want to be? And that's not a one size fits all. It will be different for every company. Think about what sort of techniques you think will work with your colleagues to get you to where you want to be. Have that confidence, so go for it. But also, as much as you can, try and make data fun. So making it kind of more engaging and more accessible to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandra?
Yeah, I think for me also 3 things. So keep stressing that an analytics mindset, it's not about being a math wizard or great at statistics, but about asking the right questions at the right time. The second thing is indeed make it fun, but also relate to what people do on a daily basis. So relate it to their day job, and then whatever you're teaching them, it will land, and they will be able to use it. And the third thing is that with all these initiatives, we want people to trust data, but we have to be careful. We don't want them to trust blindly in data. So whenever they see a graph or an analytics result or a result of a pilot, they should also know what questions to ask to see if really the right conclusions is being drawn from this data.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a double message. We want them to trust the data, but we also want them to be critical of the advice and the conclusion from that data.
Yeah, very interesting. Hannah?
I mean, there's already some great advice, but I think put yourself in the point of the learner's shoes. So think about the way that you talk to them, how you make it relatable, and what they are trying to get from this. How do you make it something they want to take part in? Much like Josh said, I think it has to be driven from somewhere, be that through an ownership, a steering group, a working group, a team of people. It can't be a side of desk. It's too important for that. And I think that the third one is, when we talk about culture, we're talking about people, and it's really easy to forget sometimes that there are people who sometimes will be very scared and very reluctant to make this transformation. So approaching it as a change transformation with people really at the heart, I think, is a piece of advice that I would pass on and say, I really hope you think it's as important as I do to incorporate them from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, 14:47, so 2 minutes over. I thought I did a pretty good job there of trying to keep a lid on that. Panel, thank you so much. Great insights, great conversation. Obviously, I know we only managed to tackle a handful of the key questions that came in, but obviously we can pick up on anything outside of that. Quick question, if people are interested in kind of picking your brains on anything that they've seen or heard today, are you okay for people to kind of reach out on LinkedIn?
Definitely. Just reach out and drop me a message, connect.
Perfect. Excellent. Love to hear that. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining in. Thanks for all the questions. And we'll see you when we're back again live very soon.
Thanks all.
Thanks all.